Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome back to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we're talking as a community about the changing nature of work. I'm Caroline Fairchild, editor-at-large at LinkedIn, coming to you from my home office here in New York City. In just 3 weeks since the killing of George Floyd started national protests, hundreds of companies have come out with statements to confront systemic racism head-on. Whether it's Wall Street CEOs, sports giant Nike, the NFL, or even fruit snack company Gushers, there have been a wave of statements in support of diversity across social media platforms. But these open messages of support beg one big question. What are companies going to do next to confront the systemic racism they say still exists? On today's show, we'll speak with the CEO who doesn't claim to have all the answers, but is taking that first step forward. Levi Strauss Co CEO Chip Bergh will join us on the show today to discuss the results of Levi's first ever diversity and inclusion report, which discovered while women and people of color make up the vast majority of their workforce, just 18% of Levi's global leadership team is comprised of people of color, and there are no Black members of the executive leadership team. In a letter to employees sent out this morning, Bergh wrote, "We know that businesses are stronger and more successful when they are diverse and represent the companies they serve. More importantly, though, this is a moral imperative. We pride ourselves on being a progressive company that takes bold stances to promote equity, justice, and inclusivity all around the world. But the hard truth is we have not always lived up to these principles internally." We'll speak with Bergh shortly on his response to these protests, as well as how he sees the nature of the role of the CEO changing as we move into 2020. But before we speak with Bergh, I want to hear from you. The whole point of this show is to have a conversation as a community about this pandemic, protests, and how work is changing in real time for us. We want to hear insights from you. If you have questions for Bergh, please let us know in the comments, and we'll get to those questions later on in the show. And with that, I want to bring Chip into the stream.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Chip. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So this is Levi's first ever diversity and inclusion report for a company that's been around since the 1850s. Talk me through what it took to put this together and what you learned.
Well, I guess since this entire, over the last couple of months, with the incidents that were happening, we put a statement out after the George Floyd killing, and words are one thing, but taking action is another. So we've had a lot of internal dialogue. We have a Black employee resource group, which is called Onyx. Spent a lot of time engaging with them and other employee resource groups inside the company. And one of the first calls was, let's be transparent with the data. And we have the data. And so pulling the data together was not that difficult. I think there are a lot of companies right now scrambling to pull their data together, but pulling the data together was not that difficult. But the real soul searching, I guess, was what are we going to do about it? Having the data forces us to face the brutal truth that while we have a very diverse organization company-wide, when you start drilling down into the numbers, we're not as diverse in leadership, particularly, as we need to be, and we need to put concrete actions in place to address it.
And what are some of those concrete actions? I feel like we're at this point with this crisis where the statements are out there. We just saw some of them at the top of the show, but now CEOs like you are having to really think critically about what the next steps are. You mentioned a few initiatives, but I'd like to hear what you're thinking about in the next few weeks in terms of making those numbers progress to the direction that you want them to go.
Yeah, so first and foremost is publishing our data and making a commitment to publish it every year. I do think, facts are the starting point, and facing the brutal truth that those facts underlie is the first step in making progress and making a real commitment to improve those numbers over time. This is a company that has a really long track record and also putting its money where its mouth is in terms of supporting diversity, supporting social justice, externally through the Levi Strauss Foundation and our own company giving. Over the last 5 years, we've donated more than $37 million to different organizations around the country to support equality. And, we desegregated our factories in the South back when we had factories in the South and Southeast. back in the 1950s. So we've been focused on racial equality for 70 years. The problem is, while we've done a lot of great work externally, we have real opportunities internally when we look at the data. So other specific actions that we're taking, I just hired a new Chief Human Resources Officer. She started about 3 months ago. We've had a vacant diversity, inclusion, and belonging officer position open now for about a year. Our prior leader there left, and with the HR officer role open, it was very challenging to recruit somebody. So we're very committed to filling that role quickly. We've declared Juneteenth, which, as you all know, is an important holiday here in the United States. We've declared that a paid holiday on a global basis to recognize the importance of that momentous date in history. We've committed to adding a Black person to our board of directors, and that is a search that is already underway. We also do a pay equity study, which we've been doing. We did our first one about 2 years ago. We are including not just gender, but racial pay equity in that study as well as we go forward. And we're committing to reporting the results of that data as it comes out, and we'll do that study every 2 years. It's a pretty complicated thing to do, and it takes a lot of work, but it doesn't tend to change a whole lot either over time. And we're doubling down on our recruiting efforts at historically Black colleges and universities. We've had some good success there. It's pretty recent, just in the last 2 years, but we're committing to doubling down there. We've got to fill our pipeline. And then I think the last thing that's really important and worth mentioning is we have an extremely diverse organization in our distribution and retail organization here in the US. And that's what drives our diversity as a company overall. We're much less diverse at corporate headquarters, and we're committed to putting a program together for those employees that aspire to corporate type roles in retail and distribution, to give them opportunities and access to do that, because that ultimately is probably the best pipeline that we have, because they're already employees of LS & Co.
And if you're just joining the stream, this is Business Unusual, where we're talking with Levi Strauss Co. CEO Chip Bergh about a path forward to promote racial equity, both internally at Levi's as well as externally. I want to say hello to some members in the stream: Michael from San Francisco, where I think Chip is right now, Christine from Virginia, Lon from Connecticut, and Giselle from Philadelphia. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you have questions for Chip on how he's thinking about this as a CEO, let us know. Chip, I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned a town hall that you've had in wake of the protests with your employees and learning from the Black employees that are currently at Levi's. What can you tell us about those conversations, as so many leaders right now are trying to be in a place where they can learn what they don't know and also chart a path forward?
Yeah, it's been really eye-opening. It's unfortunate that it's taken all of the aggregation of all these incidents over the last several months, years, decades, centuries to get to this point. But I do feel that we may be at a tipping point right now. I feel like, at least inside, many of our employees feel that they have a voice, and we are really, really listening. One of our values is empathy, and really trying to understand with empathy what they live with every single day, and not just outside the four walls of our company, but inside. And I think that was, what really has brought this home for me is not just the data; it's what's underneath the data. The sense that people feel that they have to conform to a particular mold to be successful at our company is a bit of a gut punch, because I really do believe that one of my biggest responsibilities as a CEO is to empower people so that everybody feels like they can come to work every single day, be their true, authentic self, and bring their very best self to work. And if somebody feels like they have to conform to a mold to be a particular way to be successful at Levi's, they can't bring their full authentic self to work every single day. So to really unleash the power of each individual inside this company really is about inclusivity and belonging and people feeling safe and providing that safety net for people so that they can be themselves. And so in the town hall, which I've been doing every 2 weeks since we've been sheltered in place now for 3 months, and we do it on a global basis. We did bring in members of the Onyx Employee Resource Group where they shared some stories and they didn't hold back. And it was gut wrenching. It really was, it was hard to listen to. And as a white male, in his 60s now, who grew up during the race riots of the 1960s, the stark reality is, as a country, we have not made any progress here. And that means individuals in the country have not been able to be their true full self. And how much is that impacting our potential as a country as well? So it was a big wake up call. It is very, very clear that for us as a company to reach our full potential, I have to build a culture and create an opportunity so that each individual can live up to their full potential and bring their true, authentic, real self to work every single day to unleash their potential.
And you called bringing your whole self to work, making sure that you're building a company where employees feel that, as one of your biggest responsibilities as a CEO, which I think moving forward, we're going to hear a lot more CEOs saying that and putting that out there as, say, one of the few things that they are really focused on right now. On top of these town halls, how are you keeping teams accountable to make sure that that's happening on the lower levels of management all the way up to the executive level?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and being flat out straight, we are not to the point right now where we have set specific goals and targets, and that is work that's underway. But we did feel it's important to get out there with commitments right now, and we are, and hopefully you can hear it in my voice, we are really committed to making progress here. We will get to a place as we bring in this new head of diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and really build a concrete strategy around diversity and inclusion, that we will get to a place where we've got targets, goals, and we will hold leaders accountable for achieving those targets and goals. And we've set some big ones, right at the outset, that we're gonna bring a Black leader onto our board of directors. That's a pretty big thing to commit to, and that search is underway, but it's something we absolutely have to do. And I'm committed to having Black executives on our leadership team in the near future. So we will have concrete goals and hold people accountable, and we're going to be looking at this and monitoring our progress. And I expect that the board is going to be providing governance oversight to monitor progress as well.
Mm. And you've been at Levi's now for over 8 years. Before that, you were an executive at Procter & Gamble for over 20. You were also in the Army. I wanted to ask you, is this the most challenging time that you've had to lead in any respect in corporate America with this pandemic and these protests?
No question. Absolutely the most difficult period of my entire adult life and entire career. It seems we go from one crisis to the next, but I said the other day, I think this is the first time in my career where I'm running a business without a forecast. We have a range of different scenarios right now for this year, next year, and the following year. And nobody really knows how it's going to play out. So from a business standpoint, it's incredibly challenging. Obviously, the fact that we're not together, everybody's working remote, everybody's got Zoom fatigue or Microsoft Teams fatigue. Pick your video conferencing of choice. And I feel like I've never worked harder in my life. I know that everybody inside my company feels exactly the same way. The level of stress is intense, and we're managing several different crises. And I'm really proud of what we've accomplished, Caroline. You've watched this company for 7 of the last 8 years, I think, or it's almost 9 years. We've made incredible progress. Took the company public, about 18 months ago. Big turnaround. Our business, if I measured my success purely upon our revenues and profits, this would be devastating, because we're going to take a major haircut when it comes to our business results. Our stores have been closed on average about 3 months around the world. I mean, you can do the math. And, but I am convinced that we will come out of this crisis stronger than ever. I am convinced that this whole issue of diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and really getting focused concretely on that and the culture that we need to be successful with that, is going to make us a better company. And I'm convinced that we're going to come out of this much stronger than we went into it.
You mentioned running a company without a forecast. For an Army vet, that must be challenging. We saw retail sales numbers come out this morning. They're a bit up. And as states are in various stages of reopening, how are you thinking about reopening stores, but also keeping employees safe?
Yeah, at the very outset of this, starting in China, actually, because we're a big global company, so we kind of had the first wave of this in China, but our very first principle was to put employee safety first and above all else. And that's what we're doing, is reopening stores. If you listen in on different earnings calls and listen to different retailers, many of the big ones have most of their stores, if not all of their stores, open, or very, very close to that. I think here in the US right now, we're still less than 50% of our stores are open. And we have a dashboard, red, yellow, green, and we have to be green on 2 out of 3 of the metrics. And that includes, whether the incidence of COVID is increasing or declining, and if it's been declining for 2 weeks, availability of hospital beds. So we're looking at specific criteria. We've got hard criteria in place to determine whether we open our stores or not. And when we do open our stores, we're doing it in a very, very safe manner. Obviously, our employees are all wearing masks. We're respectfully requesting that consumers, when they come into the stores, that they wear masks. We're putting big time effort on sanitization, in part for the safety of our own employees, but also for the safety of customers. We think it's important that they see we're doing our best to keep our stores clean and safe. We're limiting traffic inside the stores to a very small number to allow for social distancing. So, that makes running a store much more challenging. But we are confident that when consumers come back, they're going to come back to the brands that they know, that they trust, that they love. We continue to invest in marketing support during the shutdown. We did a 5:01 concert series every single night at 5:01 p.m. We featured different artists on our Instagram Live account. And so, we've tried to maintain the brand's relevance through all of this. And we're confident coming out of it that, as I said earlier, we're going to come out of it stronger. We think it's an opportunity for the brand and to build share over time as well.
I want to go ahead and bring in some member comments from the stream from those who are joining us. Julie says, diversity in hiring is important, but let's get boards diversified too. Seek out diverse potential board members to better reflect your clientele. Yvonne says, I agree. Every company should have executives that mirror what the staff looks like. It's important for Black and brown people to have role models in the companies they work for. Thanks for doing this and making a commitment. Julie and Yvonne, thank you so much for joining us on the stream. Chip, this topic of diversity and inclusion and taking a bold step for action. This is not the first time in your tenure at Levi's that you've spoken out on issues that do not pertain to Levi's day-to-day business, whether it's supporting the rights of various parts of your employees who have different sexual orientations, or asking your customers not to bring guns into stores. You've spoken boldly out on issues that could alienate some customers. Talk to us a little bit about how you see the changing nature of the CEO role changing, and why you've spoken out on these issues so consistently.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I really do believe that the role of the CEO today has radically changed from what it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, and we we have a platform. I have a platform here at Levi Strauss, and in fact, I have a legacy that I have a responsibility to live up to. At this company, the CEO has never been shy to take positions and take stands on the most important issues of our day. And we have a long track record of doing it. I mentioned desegregating our factories 10 years before the Civil Rights Act. But when the Boy Scouts banned gay troop leaders back in the early 1990s, we pulled all funding from the Boy Scouts and got 130,000 letters and emails saying, I'm never buying Levi's again. And the company did not waver. More recently, with all the gun violence after the Parkland shooting, we took a stand to end gun violence in this country. It started with a request from some of our store managers who run stores in open carry states where they have customers walking into their stores brandishing a gun, and they don't know if they're a good guy or a bad guy, and concerned about the safety of the people in the store. So our path to the gun violence issue started with a letter requesting gun owners not to bring guns into our store. We followed a model that a number of other retailers had preceded us with, and that kind of got us into this issue. And then after the Parkland shooting, we took a much bolder stand. And just to put some perspective around it, I do think we've kind of helped to drive a little bit of a tipping point on this message. A year ago, back in January, H.R. 8 was introduced in the House of Representatives, and I led a letter that went to all congressmen and women, asking that this be passed. And I had 3 other CEOs join me on the letter. In September, we did a similar letter to the Senate, to Mitch McConnell in the Senate, because the Senate version of that bill was sitting on McConnell's desk, and unfortunately, it's still sitting there. But we had over 160 other CEOs sign that letter. So CEOs, by being the point of the spear, I guess, I've made it a little bit easier for other CEOs to begin speaking out on this. But, I do think that we have, as a company, we have a responsibility to multiple stakeholders, including our employees, our retirees, and including the communities where we live and work. And I think as governments pull away, as NGOs pull away from some of these social issues, we have a void to fill. And that's what we've been trying to do, trying to make a difference. A positive difference in the world is part of what this company and the Levi's brand, at Halo is the brand as well. It's part of what we're all about.
And I've seen some members in the stream agreeing with you. Mary says this is true, a stark reality. We have to focus on the changes that affect the outcomes. I also want to bring in some questions from the stream, Chip. We have one from John. He's talking about tokenism. He says, when you think about adding Black leaders to your team, how do you make sure they aren't seen as just the go-to for Black issues? He also says, go Army.
Awesome. Well, at least you didn't say go Navy. It's a great point. I mean, at the end of the day, it needs to be performance-based, and people need to be moved ahead based on their performance. But I think what we have to do is take a hard look at what's holding them back, and are there really legitimate reasons why some of these Black leaders at lower levels have not been able to progress. And my commitment is to make sure that we're breaking down, we talk about systemic racism on the outside. And when I look at the numbers of our company on the inside, the big challenge I am living with right now is, do we have systemic racism on the inside? Because when you look at the numbers, we've got a very diverse company globally. And the numbers are posted on levistrauss.com, so everybody can go and look at it. We're very diverse globally. We're very diverse here in the US. But when you strip out the retail and distribution center folks and look at just the corporate office, and then drill down further and look at leadership, look at my executive team, look at the board of directors, we're not as diverse as we need to be. And that begs the question, are there systemic reasons why we're not as diverse? Are there systemic reasons that have kept Black leaders and Latinx leaders from progressing at this company. And that's what I'm committed to really knocking down and attacking.
Barbara in the stream says you're definitely going to follow through with that commitment. She writes, if anyone can lead this work and hold a clear line to defend what is right and responsible, it's Chip. I have 100% confidence in him. I worked with him at Procter. He will follow with what he offers as a public statement. If he says he'll do it, never a doubt. Barbara, thank you for joining us on the show and bringing that perspective. Gloria has a question that I have too, which is, I'm sure you're speaking with other leaders right now across corporate America. What do you see as kind of the key barriers holding back companies from making the progress that right now you are intending to do?
I think it's partly pride and partly fear of looking in the mirror and really holding yourself accountable. I mean, at the end of the day, this has probably been one of the hardest things for me to deal with personally, is looking at the data and basically saying, I've failed at this. And that's a hard thing to kind of swallow. There's a lot of great things I think I've done at this company. We turned it around, and business result is great, and the Levi's brand has never arguably been stronger. But I've let people down, and I have failed in my responsibility to build a diverse organization at all levels in this company. And I think that's probably what gets in the way of other leaders and other companies really starting to deal with this. Is, the first step to making progress is to admit that you're failing and to admit that you've got opportunities.
Seen a lot more questions and comments in the stream from Fran, Carla, Mary, Babin. I'm sorry we're not going to have time to get to you, but thank you so much for joining us on the show. Chip, before I let you go, you discussed this time as the most challenging time that you've had to lead a company. And this, with all crisis comes opportunity. What are the long-lasting commitments and things that are happening amid this pandemic and protests that you think are hoping will outlast the pandemic itself and stay with Levi's moving forward?
From a business standpoint or social, are you talking inside or outside?
Let's start inside, and then if we have time, you can expand outside.
Yeah, well, inside, I mean, I think one of the biggest opportunities is what we've been spending our time talking about, which is reshaping the company, reshaping leadership, and truly building a more diverse, more powerful organization. From a business standpoint, the pandemic represents all kinds of opportunities for us. We've got some competitors that have gone bankrupt. I think the retail industry landscape is going to change dramatically. There are going to be real estate opportunities for us. We've got over 3,000 stores globally. So huge opportunity for us to improve our real estate, potentially reduce rents, so structural economic improvements as well. So there are a number of big business opportunities, and the Levi's brand, I think, is going to come out of this more resilient and more strong than ever. The consumer is fundamentally going to change through this. There's going to be more of a pivot to e-commerce. We've seen that. We've been investing there. We're well positioned there, but we're accelerating and doubling down in our investment there. I also think sustainability is going to be really, really important to consumers, and that plays to our strong suit. We're one of the most sustainable brands around. Think about it. You buy a pair of Levi's, or you buy a Levi's trucker jacket, and you could be handing it down to your grandchildren someday. And so a lot of this, I think, plays to our advantage. And that's why our focus has always been, since the beginning of this crisis, how do we come out of this stronger? As a country, my biggest hope is that we see real change happening through this. This is an election year. And if everybody that is taken to the streets to protest what's happening in this country goes to the polls and holds leaders accountable, and I'm not just talking the president and national leadership, I'm talking mayors and sheriffs and local leaders at the city, at the county, at the state level. The time to make real policy change is at the polls. And we're very committed to get out the vote. It's an effort we started in the midterm elections. We partnered with Patagonia. We got over 400 companies to join us to give their employees time off to vote on election day. We're one of the few democracies in the world where election day falls on a work day. And we know that the election this year is going to be very, very messy between the pandemic and social distancing. There are going to be massive lines. We saw it a couple of weeks ago. And so we're doing everything that we can to get the vote out, to get people registered. We're registering people in our stores as we did during the midterm elections, and to get people out to vote. And hopefully through that, real change can begin to happen. Holding leaders accountable for their actions or inactions is one of the most powerful things we can do in a democracy. And democracy only works if people go vote. And as a company, we believe companies have a responsibility to make sure that their employees have the opportunity and the time to vote.
Well, Chip, I know I speak for the stream when I say thank you so much for joining us, not just joining us, but for having an open and honest conversation. Justin says it's super important CEOs say these words and take action. Jessica says, I applaud Chip Bergh for taking this interview and speaking live. This is a step in the right direction and does show commitments to D&I. Gloria says, thank you, Chip Bergh, for demonstrating vulnerability and owning diversity from the top down. As always, Chip, I'll be tracking your progress, and I hope that we can talk soon.
Thanks, Caroline. Great to see you.
That was Levi Strauss Co. CEO Chip Bergh talking to us about the steps he's taking to promote racial equity, both within Levi's as well as without. I want to thank him for taking the time to join us on Business Unusual. This is a live show where we're talking to you about the changing nature of work, coming to you from the LinkedIn news page every day at noon Eastern. Tomorrow, I'll be speaking with business and tech leader Guy Valens to talk about his new startup, which is a networking opportunity for Black professionals. We'll be at the LinkedIn news page at 12 Eastern. I hope that you join us. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thank you so much.